Hello. Today I'd like to start off a little bit of fun that I'm going to have with some snowballs. A snowball is a block, a quilting block. I'm not actually going to be throwing balls of snow at anybody. A snowball is a block that often it looks a little bit like this. It's a square usually, and it has corner triangles, and I guess that just kind of gives it that round look, so it looks a little bit like a snowball in that sense. And I'm going to make this project I'm working on at the moment is using two colours, so I'm using the yellow and the green. And I just thought I'd show you how I go about making the snowball block. It's often used as an alternate block to go with others to create a design, but I'm going to be just using this one in its own right, repeated throughout this quilt. So I'll just quickly show you how I make the block. So I'm starting off with a 6.5 inch square. My block will measure 6.5 inches, so a 6-inch finished block. So I start off, I need to have some 6.5 inch squares, and some 2.5 inch squares for these corners. So I've already cut myself some 6.5 inch squares and some 2.5 inch squares. And because I'm just using two colours, I've cut some from each colour range. I have done a couple of tutorials on cutting the 2.5 inch and the 6.5 inch squares in case you're interested, on Quilting Tips and Techniques 141 and 142. And today I'm using both those sizes. So to be able to get this little corner triangle on here, rather than cutting out triangles and making it a little bit fiddly, we start out with a square and we sew that on diagonally. So on the back of my squares here, these are the yellow ones, and I'm going to sew these on to the green square. I'm just going to get a pencil and a ruler here, and I'm going to just mark my sewing line to make it a little bit easier. So I lay my squares with the wrong side of the fabric up, and with my ruler I just want to come through the diagonal points, and I've just got one of these mechanical pencils. I find they work really well because they give you quite a fine line. So I'm just going straight through the diagonal there, and I'm just going to draw a line through there. Now I need a second line because I don't want to waste this triangle that we would otherwise cut off. So I'm going to now slide my ruler across so that a marker on here that's 1/2 inch in from the edge sits right over that line I've just drawn, right through the diagonal of the block. And I'm going to draw another line, so that's 1/2 inch away. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. So I've now got two lines on my square, one right through the diagonal and one 1/2 inch away. Now I'll just do that again. I've got a couple more squares here to do. So a line right through the diagonal, move the ruler across 1/2 inch so that the line 1/2 inch in sits right over the top of the line you've drawn, and draw another line 1/2 inch away. Just one more, and I'll have enough to sew the corners on. Okay, right through the diagonal and one 1/2 inch away. Now this second line we're drawing is because I'm wanting to save the triangles and use them for something else. You wouldn't have to do that, but it seemed like a good idea to me at the time. So now I'm going to position these onto my 6.5 inch square, a 2.5 inch one right sides together, with the diagonal line going from point to point and the other shorter line that's 1/2 inch away from that centre one out towards the outside of the triangle. And I'm just going to sew that on, and I'm going to sew right along that line. Now at the same time I've already prepared another one here in this other colour, because I'll just show you how I would do it with chain piecing, because quite often you'd be making several blocks at a time and you can just run them through one after the other without taking it out of the machine. So I've got everything set up here, and I'm just going to sew right along on top of that line that I've drawn. And when I get to the end, I can get my next block that's all ready to sew and pop that right there so that I continue sewing on the drawn line onto the next block. And I could continue on doing that with more blocks, but today I'll stop at the 2. And I'll just show you with this other line that I've drawn there, I'm just going to sew that as well while we're in this at this stage. So again, I'm sewing right on that second line that we've drawn through, and again you can chain piece these in as well, so you don't have to keep stopping and starting, taking it out all the time. Bring that one so that it comes in, again sewing right on that drawn line. And you can continue on, of course, with as many blocks as you're going to do in that manner. And now I'll just keep working on the one block at this stage. So I put my next corner on, and again sew on the longer diagonal line. And if I was continuing on, I would chain piece the next one in, but I'm just going to quickly do these 4 to show you on the one block. So just keep working around your square here. So both your diagonal lines. This is quite fun to do with just 2 colours, but not necessarily just 2 fabrics. You might have a whole lot of reds and whites, for example, and they could be all different reds and all different whites. Or maybe you like lots of blues, dark blues and light blues, or yellow and green, of course. I've got one more corner to go here. Let's put that on there. Sew those 2 lines quickly. So this second line I'm sewing does take a little bit more time and effort. When you're drawing the lines, you might find that you want to sit down, perhaps you've got a favourite TV show or something, and you could sit and draw all the lines so that it's not so tedious, and then sew them when you've got them all drawn. It's not necessary to do this second line, but as I said, I didn't want to not be able to use those triangles, and if you sew it now, it's easier to reuse them later on. So now I've sewn all my 4 corners on. I've got 2 lines of sewing, and I'm now going to slice off the corner because we're going to be folding these back so that you get that. So you don't need this triangle that's underneath here. So with my ruler, I'm going to lay my 1/4 inch marking down right on top of my longer diagonal seam line, and I'm going to trim away that little corner, which has also now got a seam in it, and if you open that out, you've got a whole lot of small half square triangles that would be quite fiddly to make, but made like this. You could use them in the same quilt, or you could use them for another project, but it just means that they're a very usable little bit on the side there. So I'm just going to trim off all 4 of those corners like that. So I've now got 4 of these usable little bits and pieces. I'm going to bring my iron across. So I've got my iron ready to go here. Now because I'm alternating my blocks, I'm going to press my seams on one block one way and on the other block the other way. So on the yellow block that I've done here with the green corners, I've pressed the seam out into the green corner. And so on this green block here, I'm going to press my seams into the green. So if you always remember you're going into the green, but mostly so that when you come to join the blocks, the seams are alternating in their direction, so it's easier for them to nestle together for joining up. So I'll just press those seams into the green. And I'll just quickly show you with these little triangles that we've cut off here, the same thing. If you press in, I guess if it's to a darker colour it doesn't really matter so much necessarily with this, but you get these very usable, they're going to be approximately 1.5 inches square. You might want to square them up if you were using them for some particular project. They might be useful in the border, they might be useful for anything. I just thought they were more useful like this than just cutting them off on this occasion. So you get, for every block you make, you're going to get 4 of those small squares that can be used for something else. So here I've got my two blocks that are opposite colours because I'm using just two colours, the green and the yellow, for this quilt. These colours perhaps are not showing up as well as some others in the way of contrast goes, but I'm quite happy with the way they look, and I have made a sample. So these blocks are measuring 6.5 inches square, so they'll be a finished 6-inch block, and I'll just show you a sample of something I put together, and just in the green and yellow because I thought it was nice and fresh and cheerful. But I did have a little problem. I noticed something else snuck in when I wasn't watching. There's a little square in there that doesn't really match, with some little owls on it. Owls I find are quite invasive at times. But anyway, this is how those blocks, if you just sew those blocks together, that's what it's something like what it's going to look like. Of course, in different colours it would look different. And on the back here you can see that my seams are alternating in direction, so that it makes it easier for when you're joining the squares up for those seams to nestle together. So that is my snowball block in two colours and one owl block, just to be difficult. Just to give you a bit of an example of how a relatively simple block can look quite fun, great for using up bits and pieces, 6.5 inch and 2.5 inch squares combined together, and even some little bits left over that could be quite fun used up in a border. So that was the starting fun with snowballs. Thank you.